Coaching for the ages. Leader Fan Radio Network.
3-hour tour.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes, 10 seconds past the hour of 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. It is a Tuesday edition of the highly combustible, occasionally controversial bumper-to-bumper program on a calm before the frostbite NAMI weekday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. My name is Dan Barreiro. I host the program. Guardsy eventually will be back to produce, but he is still tracking, I think, Golden Gopher women's basketball. So for the third consecutive day, it's Brett Blakemore in that chair. That goes back to your usual bit on Sunday sermons, correct?
Yes.
And you're with us again tomorrow, you tell me.
Yep. Guardsy back Thursday.
Guardsy back apparently.
I think you're in the cage.
That is true. Good reminder. Yeah. We will be doing Thursday, our first cage show, Target Center, cage location. It's a monster rivalry. When you think NBA rivalries, do you not think Bulls, Timberwolves? I think we all do. So we will be there Thursday. Got a good guest lineup already kind of percolating and coming together. More on that as we get a little later into the week. The Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line remains open, rebooted at 64686. I promise you, I am not going to turn this program into and it is a 3-hour tour today leading into Wild Hockey, into Hoosier Hotline. I can't ignore it. I don't think I'm doing my job as a talk show host if I'm not covering a remarkable story. So it will be interspersed. It will be part of what we do, regardless of whether the school involved was a school that I attended and graduated from and started my graduate school unsuccessful master's dissertation. No, master's, I guess you could say, more than dissertation, didn't complete the master's program. It means something a little extra for me. This got, for me, very much a local angle based on where I went to school and where I grew up, etc. But I'm going to do my best to make much of the first hour of the program more inclusive, even if you're not as interested as many people are on what our 4 o'clock in-studio guest believes, and I don't disagree with him, is the best college football story in 100 years. I don't think that's hyperbole. I don't think that's recency bias. What ultimately was culminated in a national championship for Indiana, there's not anything that can quite compare to it. That said, maybe we can include others who don't want to hear about Indiana's football run any longer, or they aren't interested in a 3-hour tour about it. Maybe we can entice them with this. If you take as a given that Curt Cignetti's run at Indiana University through 2 years is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, coaching job that has ever been done in team sports, college or pro. What other ones do we put in that mix to go along with it? And again, this isn't about the greatest coaches of all time. This is about the greatest coaching sequence of all time. Because obviously, you got to do it as historic as the run has been for Cignetti in Indiana. He's got to do it a lot longer before you get into the conversations of among, the Newt Rockneys, the Nick Sabans of the world in college. And same in whether we're talking about hockey or we're talking about pro basketball or we're talking about baseball. I'm not here to do the old who are the greatest coaches of all time and managers of all time. I'm interested in the greatest coaching runs or greatest coaching performances over a shorter period. It could be a season. If it's 3 in a row for Mike Yeo, I guess you can't argue with that. But that's what fascinates me today, and I think can bring more people in, maybe people who are a little bit more interested in other sports, about what else should be in the mix. I got a hold of a story via The Ringer that attempted probably very analytically to sort of, try to put all this in perspective and compare and contrast what Cignetti did with some other all-time great, again, coaching performances over a given stretch of time. And the writer writes that he created something called the SIGS scale. Consistency, irrelevance. Well, let me give you the drill down on each of those. Consistency, by that he means no flashes in the pan. Great coaches are able to keep their team's turnaround rolling for multiple seasons or demonstrate a repeated ability to turn teams around. Irrelevance, you got to raise the dead. We're giving bonus points for coaches who win at historically dismal stops, but we're ignoring those who simply turn a good team into a great one. He's saying, if you inherit goodness, I'm not going to put you on this list if you get us to greatness. You could argue a good example of that would be Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson, the Bulls were not terrible when he went to Chicago to take over for Doug Collins. They were already on the map, but they were kind of stuck in the muck, right? So you could say, yeah, hard to argue. He's an all-time great coach, but in terms of the run, how much do you evaluate, or how much you have to factor in what was handed to him? Growth. The best coaching performance as it pertains to turning a losing team into a winning one, meaning the players in the team have to outperform expectations. If a turnaround happened because a team got a generational talent with a draft pick, landed a superstar in a trade, or benefited from any decision made by LeBron James, we're downgrading it. We are not, for example, celebrating Gene Chizik winning after Auburn got Cam Newton. Speed. To garner consideration for the greatest coaching performance honor, a coach needs to win almost immediately after being hired. And he points out what I did. We're not searching for the greatest coach of all time. That's too big and too layered a discussion. So apologies to Krzyzewski, the aforementioned Michael Jordan, already in the playoffs every year before he took over, and many others. Doesn't mean they weren't great coaches, but it means that's a different conversation that we are going to have. And he lays out a number of nominees worthy of, I think, consideration. One of them, soccer-related, which might perk up our substitute producer today, which we'll get to in just a minute. And there are a couple names that the average Rube probably doesn't even remember unless you're old enough. Gary Barnett at Northwestern. So if you go back to 1995, Northwestern was the losingest program ever. Not Indiana, but Northwestern. And by the way, it has again overtaken Indiana as of November of 2025. They've kind of been handing the baton back and forth. Now it looks like I don't think Indiana's going to get the baton back anytime soon based on what we've seen. The 95 Wildcats, he writes, went on a Hoosier-esque run, undefeated in Big Ten play to make the Rose Bowl. Follow that up with a second Big Ten championship in 1996. So why would this be in the conversation? Well, as he says, this is demonstrably true. Northwestern was so bad historically that the late, great Denny Green, before he came here, was named Big Ten Coach of the Year. Do you know what his record was when he won Big Ten Coach of the Year at Northwestern? 3-8. 3-8. And nobody mocked it because 3-8 at Northwestern, based on what they had been, made it seem like you've done something. So Barnett wins the Big Ten twice in a row. So he has to be at least in this conversation. Now, Sig's advantage over him is in Barnett's first 3 years, he was 8-24-1. So it took him longer. Remember, Cignetti arrived, I think Indiana had 3 consecutive 3-9 seasons before he got here. And in their first season, they ended up losing 2 games. This year, they lost no games, right? That's awfully fast, one could say. So I would give the edge, I think, to Cignetti, but it's okay to celebrate some of these others. That's the point. I'll give you the short list of others that he nominates. Howard Schnellenberger, University of Miami. Because once upon a time, University of Miami wasn't great in football. When Howard Schnellenberger showed up, he kind of changed everything there, and others followed him with some success. We got a local nominee, according to this Ringer piece, Cheryl Reeve, Minnesota Lynx. Before 2010, Minnesota had never won a playoff series, let alone a title. Down year in Reeve's first season on the job. Then the Lynx won the title in her second year. They then posted the WNBA's best record in 3 straight seasons. Remember, they had the second worst record in WNBA history when Reeve began. They now have the second best record in WNBA history. Now, he takes points away because of talent. Maya Moore is a generational player and one of the best basketball players of all time. And several other Hall of Famers were at her disposal, including, of course, Argyle Lindsay Whalen, Simone Augustus, Maya Moore, etc. Bill Belichick is on this list as well. Hard not to include him because even though he's in the greatest coaching conversation across the board, he's had stretches of absurdly effective success. Keep in mind, though, the Patriots weren't horrible when he got there. The previous 2 coaches, Bill Parcells and Pete Carroll, New England had finished 500 or better for 4 straight seasons before Belichick came to town. So does he fit? I don't know. Hockey is represented. Mike Keenan, New York Rangers. Keenan spent 1 year as the Rangers coach, taking over a squad that had missed the playoffs entirely the season before. In 1 year, in that 1 year, New York won the Cup in overtime of game number 7. Worthy of consideration. Jim Leyland, Florida Marlins manager, is in this mix. Lenny Wilkins, Seattle Supersonics, if you want to go way back as a coach. Sean McVay of the Rams is on this list. My buddy Rick Bozich will be devastated to find out that Joe Madden of the Cubs, manager of the Cubs, is on this list. He hates Joe Madden. All the names are interesting to me, and they're good fodder, and I think they help engineer some, maybe foster and inspire some conversation from our texts here, or from our texters. But let me ask you where this fits in. What about what the late, great Herb Brooks did with the Miracle Lake Placid team? Now, you could say that's a shorter period of time. It's not a league, but it's the Olympics. You were probably too young for it, but I'm sure you know the story. He takes a bunch of kids, whips them into shape, and convinces them that you can beat the commies. You don't have to be afraid of the commies. I'm not going to be nice to you as I challenge you to get the best out of what you have to offer. I think that's got to be in the conversation for sure, even though, again, it's not a full season, but they were together. Usually what? Don't they usually get together a year early or so, many months early, certainly? And then you got, you obviously have exhibition games, you prepare, whatever. But this is the direction I'd like to see us go in our number 1. How well is Minnesota represented in this regard? But it doesn't have to just be Minnesota. What are your own criteria? And again, it's not name the greatest coach of all time. It's name the greatest coaching performance over a given period of time. And I do agree with the Ringer writer when he says, I'm going to give extra points for the obvious. By the way, the writer's name, to give him credit, is Roger Sherman. If what you've inherited is a wasteland, if what you've inherited is a disaster, if what you've inherited also is a mindset that nothing good can happen here in the sport that you are coaching. It just can't happen. It's just in the water. or it's a curse, or it's a lack of commitment, whatever it is, knock yourselves out. We know you'll give it your best shot, but in the end, you will fail because that's how hard this job is. That's the part that fascinates me the most. A job that looks hopeless and turning it in 2 years into an undefeated national champion. That's a story, whether it's at Indiana University or at, dare I say it, the University of Minnesota or any place else. 64686, Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line. Are we doing bonus bucks today?
Yes, sir.
Let's do it.
The fan wants to give you a shot at those bonus bucks. Just head to KFAN.com. It's our national cash contest. The keyword for this hour is gold. Keyword is gold. KFAN.com. Keyword gold. We all had that one teacher who believed in us. Well, you can show your gratitude with Thank a Teacher. It's powered by Donors Shoes. Nominated a public school teacher to win $5,000 for a classroom. This week's winner, Alexis Hallman, a special ed teacher at Woodland Elementary School. Nominate a teacher to thank today, iHeartRadio.com/teachers.
Here's your soccer nomination offered up by the Ringer writer. Claudio, is it pronounced Ranieri?
I'm not sure, but I know who it is. I don't know the exact pronunciation, but yes.
How do you pronounce
the team?
The team that he coached.
You want to take a shot at it? It's Leicester.
Leicester City, okay.
Yeah. It's spelled Leicester. I don't know why they say it that way. He
suggests it's probably the best Indiana comp available. Like college football, the Premier League historically has been dominated by a small handful of teams with more money and fans than everybody else. Like the Hoosiers. Leicester? That's how it's pronounced?
Leicester.
Came out of nowhere to win it all. But how much of their miracle run to the 2016 Premier League Championship was due to the guidance of their first-year manager. He writes, the Foxes were in the third tier of English soccer in 2009, were nearly relegated in 15 when they hired him. In his first year as manager, they won their first premiership, and it wasn't close, 10 points clear of second-place Arsenal. As soon as he raises his hands in exultation, he kind of beats it back because he says Ranieri never achieved any similar success, so he lacks the consistency factor. This remains his only top-flight championship despite being the head man at clubs like Chelsea, Inter Milan, Roma, about a dozen other clubs over there. So his verdict is, I didn't know this. He was fired just 9 months after lifting the trophy, as 6 straight losses had dropped the Foxes into 17th place.
Yeah, that's
so it's a meteoric rise, but it didn't sustain. Now, we can't really know what the future holds for Indiana and Signetti. I think it would be difficult to believe that he's going to fall off the end of a table. I'm not sure you can count on another national championship, and now he's raised the bar to a place where if, perish the thought, he loses 3 games next year, people are going to lose their minds, but has to be put under, I guess you could say, consideration. Let me get to a few texts. We are wide open. I had one potential guest addition, but I think he's going to have to wait until tomorrow. Glenn Mason is scheduled to join us in studio at 4, and Russo Radio to talk puck. That is scheduled for 5 o'clock today, which means I do want a 520 sports fix, so you're not off the hook. And we are on at 6 o'clock for Wild hockey. I got a lot to ask you about the Wild's victory yesterday as well. Here's some text just reacting to Indiana's victory over Miami. And, I picked Indiana by a touchdown. I didn't think it was going to be a rout like the other games. I really didn't. And part of it was, 2 things. One, word on the street was the Miami defensive line was really good and disruptive. And we've seen this with any good quarterback. You can make a good quarterback look mortal at times if you just hit him enough. Now, they hit him cheaply a couple times. By the way, that's another thing I want to talk about with Seifert. I think he's going to join us tomorrow. Football fans who think the NFL has a real inconsistency problem when it comes to roughing the passer, NFL roughing the passer call is nothing compared to the absurdity of how it is or isn't called at the college level. I think that's a far bigger problem. There is literally no consistency at the college level, and I've felt this way every week for years. I'll ask one of the things we'll talk about with Glenn Mason as well. Let me get to a few texts just responding to the game. But what I was saying is they have Indiana among great teams has the lowest doofus factor of any great team I'd ever seen. And by doofus factor, we're saying getting into stupid nonsense with the other team, jawing with the other team, stupid penalties, really, really bad decision making, etc. But I did say before, during yesterday's show, sooner or later, even a great team is going to have a game where they start slipping a little bit. It's just for whatever reason. And that happened to Indiana on a couple of key occasions. Now, the roughing the passer penalty that opened the door to Miami's last drive, I thought was thin, but it was called. Worse, Indiana's got 2nd and 1 late with the ball. They can end the game if they get one more first down. And what happens? False start. Doofus factor presents itself in a way that it rarely does with Indiana. So I am not surprised that it ended up being as difficult as it was, and as close as, relatively speaking, as close as it was, because sooner or later, even great teams, as Glenn Mason has told us, they're going to step back a little bit, and they're going to have just a couple of hiccups. And by Indiana standards, they had several hiccups that stood out just because they so rarely make those kinds of mistakes. Congratulations to Miami for even apparently, and I didn't even realize this, Bossberg and Chad Abbott told me, after the game, a Miami player cold cocks an Indiana player. The whole game, it was clear part of the Miami plan was goad them into doing stupid stuff. Goad them into their doofus factor being raised. And for the most part, Indiana did not take the bait. But how do you root for that? I have no idea how, forget my rooting interest, having gone to Indiana. How can you root for a team that makes that part of their personality? I thought it was rather sad and embarrassing as well, not to mention the early to the chin strap cheap shot on Mendoza. But I digress. Let's get to let me get to some texts here, because we can go to 42 today. We can kind of play with the schedule just a little bit. Dan, you're not going to like this, as I know you've pushed back against the money narrative, but I do think the NIL money slightly diminishes Cignetti's case for generational coaching runs. 12 starters were transfers, 33 transfers on the roster in total. 47 total players on the team were over 22. Deserves a lot of credit. He's playing with the same rules everyone has, so I don't take that away from him at all. Not saying they're the Dodgers buying up everyone good, but this doesn't feel like a grassroots buildup of a program. Jeff, you're falling into the same trap that a lot of people have in trying to push back on some aspects of this story. The players that you're citing, many of the players who were transfers from James bleeping Madison. They only look good now because they became what they became. So you can think it's stupid to call this the little engine that could, kind of, roaring back and rearing its head, but you're looking at it from when they reached the point that they've reached the last several weeks, or even this entire season. And they weren't getting and did not get. They got a good transfer out of Notre Dame. The quarterback anybody could have gone after the Cal kid, Mendoza. So you're evaluating on the basis of how they are viewed now. Is NIL make things different? Does the transfer portal make things different than it was? 100%. But nobody else at a downtrodden program has done anything, playing by the same rules, has done anything close to what he has done. So you can make the effort to take away. I would say taking away is silly. Calling it different from what the conditions were and what you have, how you have to do it on the basis of the rules being different, that's fine. Because it is very different in that sense than what, let's say, Gary Barnett did at Northwestern decades and decades ago. But we're looking at Indiana through the end product. There was nobody aroused. You see all the kids from James Madison, this Signetti kid, or Signetti coach has got? Oh, man. Man, oh, man. And you see how old they are? Everybody's old now. Who isn't old now? That's the rules at this point. So I've heard it. We're going to hear more and more of it because that's sort of how people roll, because I think it makes them think they sound smart, but it leaves out so much of the story that I believe continues to make this, if not the greatest coaching job of all time, one of the greatest coaching jobs of all time. Do you think Indiana's going to maintain this high level, or will be similar to Northwestern in '99? I believe they won the Rose Bowl. That's Papatako, as we were talking about, the Gary Barnett run. They went, I think, to back-to-back Rose Bowls. I don't think they won them, but they went to back-to-back Rose Bowls. That's going to be the $64,000 question. My guess is they're not going to be as good as they were this year, realistically. But I don't think this is the kind of thing where you go, well, 3 years from now, you're not going to hear anything about Indiana again. I will be surprised just on the basis of what he seems to have figured out. But we won't know, obviously, until we know. There's a perception that Indiana bought this title. This is Darren in Circle Pines. That's a short-sighted viewpoint, takes away from Signetti's ability to find the right people. Exactly. Can anyone honestly say IU's last four opponents, Ohio State, Bama, Oregon, Miami, were less talented than Indiana? I'd argue the other teams were a better collection of individuals, but Indiana was by far the better team. Many will look at this and say it can happen anywhere. The issue with that is Signettis don't grow on trees, and he's right. I can sit here and say, well, why can't – stop telling me this can't happen here. The comeback to that is there's clearly not very many Signettis out there. And you got to find – so, you know, if a president of a school brings the AD in and says, can you find me a Signetti? I'm sure the AD would say, we're all looking for him. How many of them are out there? I don't know. Maybe his approach can somehow be copied in a way that makes it more likely that there could be a Signetti light. I don't really know. This is Austin in Apple Valley. Last night as a fan, would you rather be at the game in person to experience it live in that atmosphere, or would you rather be in Bloomington at a bar or restaurant watching with just Indiana fans and enjoying the vibes of what that town was like after the win? Feel like it's a tough question. Being at the game would be awesome, but experiencing it in Bloomington with other diehard fans, I think, would be an even better atmosphere. I think it's an unanswerable question. If I'm honest, if I could have been parachuted in to the stadium and not had to worry about all the, things that everybody has to worry about when you go to a game, lines, a whole bit, I believe that would have been the ultimate place to be. That would have been the ultimate place to enjoy the experience, even more than being in the university town, as crazy and as festive as apparently it got. I thoroughly enjoyed it from the Barca. But, teach their own. I think different people, for you, is there nothing like being there? Is there nothing like being at Lambeau, or can you enjoy the experience of a big Packers victory just as easily from your couch, or let's say with a group of other Packer fans at a bar or some event?
It depends on the scale of it. Like for this, I would consider this like if the Wild won the Cup.
That's true.
I would want to be there.
You'd want to be there,
and I would want to see Jared Spurgeon or maybe in the future Brock Faber lift the cup with my own two eyes. That would be, but like a big playoff win, you can do that from home, and I think that's okay, or at the bar. But that is another level of success that you would want to see. In my opinion, I'd want to. It
makes sense. A number of people have nominated TK. World Series title in year one with a team that hadn't made the postseason in 17 years. Finished in sixth place in the 7-team AL West in 86. Nobody has more admiration and respect for the Kelly run that ends, of course, in a pair of World Series, 87 and 91. The X factor, as odd as this sounds, with Kelly in 87 is they really weren't that good a team. They were a terrible team on the road, and then they got hot at just the right minute. That doesn't diminish what he did. I don't know that I'd put it on the same plateau as I would Signetti, or as I said, even Herbie Brooks, quite frankly, as good as those runs were. But I understand the nomination for sure. 612 guy writes, Dan, congrats on the big win. I agree Sig did an amazing job the last 2 years. Based on that scale, you mentioned he did have a first-round pick at QB last year and likely first-round pick of the draft this year. So without transfer portal, he never has 2 stud quarterbacks. And as we all know, quarterback is the most important position in sports. The advantage the system now gives you is, but there's a little still too much chicken and egg stuff going on there. So what has to be remembered is, as I said, in the case of Mendoza, he was a 2-star quarterback who, even when he was at Cal, wasn't coveted by any of the so-called blue blood programs as we got to get him. We got to go get Mendoza. So, yes, is he going to be maybe even the first overall pick? Did anybody think of him that way when he was at Cal? The answer is no. And we're back to, you can't get criticized or graded down for helping to transform a player from a middle-of-the-road quarterback to a guy who by the end of the year was viewed as maybe worthy of the first overall pick or top 10 pick. That's the part I just reject. I just don't think that you can leave out of there. And again, everybody's done the comparison. They had no 5-star recruits. I think they made history, by the way. That the previous 4 years, they did not have a single 5-star recruit. I don't think there's ever been a team that's won a national championship with that being in its past. That's not to say he didn't have some talent, but it still looked more to me like talent that he helped. I think it is the classic case of they look better collectively than they do individually at any particular position most of the way. And that's, to me, Glenn Mason has told us that's what I think makes, that's what makes, he said the quote last night, Signetti, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's a cliche, but I do think it applies. Let's see what else we got here. Mason, by the way, will be in studio to discuss this and much, much more. Tom Kelly is not in that top tier, second tier, but honorable mention. Great show today. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely on the list. I don't know that I'd put him. I'm not sure I'd put him on the top tier. Well, now we have a vote for Walter Matthau, the manager who played the manager in Bad News Bears. Now, if we want to broaden it out to fictional coaches, that's a great nomination. That's outstanding. Will you look up
Will Ferrell and Kicking and Screaming?
Yeah, there you go.
Turn that team right around.
Will you look up Bad News Bears and remind me the name of the character that Walter Matthau played? He's the beer guzzling manager,
Coach Morris Budemaker?
Oh, Buttermaker. Yeah, it was Buttermaker. Yeah, that's exactly it. Buttermaker.
Someone somewhere is really mad that I mispronounced that.
That's okay. That's a terrific movie. By the way, speaking of movies, name me another state university, any university, that can claim this trifecta. We talked about it yesterday. 50 years ago, last undefeated men's basketball NCAA title winner, 32-0, Indiana. I covered that team for the Indiana Daily Student. They now have an undefeated national football champion, the first 16-0 team, the first team, I think, to go 16-0 since it's either Yale or Harvard in like 1896. And last but not least, featured in one of the most underrated motion pictures of all time. a movie called Breaking Away. Kids won't know of it. Old-timers will. It is a charming film that does a great job of sort of capturing college life at IU and, more importantly, competition. That's the movie about, ostensibly, the Little 500 traditional bike race at IU. And in the story, Breaking Away, it lays out nicely some of the sort of, you could say, schisms between college students there and the so-called cutters. The folks who grew up in Bloomington had nothing to do with Indiana University. Didn't have a chance maybe to go to Indiana University, and sort of how that affected their lives. And they field a team. The cutters field a team for the Little 500, which is a fraternity and sorority dominated event. They're not supposed to have a chance in hell. They're mocked, they're ridiculed, and the rest is history. That's a good trifecta. Close circuit to Jeff Grayson, our old friend, a broadcast friend, who reminded me of that late last night of that film. I'm sure you've never seen it, right? Breaking Away. You don't have to care about cycling or bike racing to love the movie. It's a great drama. It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Brad Stevens with Butler Bulldogs, their championship run. Eric in Uptown. That would have to be that would be on the list, I think. I'd have to look up how irrelevant Butler was before he took over, but I don't think they were very good. This is to get me going. 612 guy. Herb Brooks didn't have Mark Cuban funding his players. I'm hoping that's tongue in cheek. I'm hoping we don't have to explain that, we don't have to shatter that myth that has been, it'll be used and you'll hear about it more and more, even though it doesn't even begin to tell the story of what took place to the positive before Mark Cuban had even a minute or had written a single check to the Indiana University football program. A couple people are nominating Herbie Brooks. He may be just joining the show. I brought him up almost immediately. That's the first name that came to my mind. Is a story that we've told often, endlessly on this show over the decades. I never get tired of it. Louis has, of course, told it often, forever. Herbie Brooks used to, and including some of the players as well. Movie, books, the whole bit. I absolutely would put them in there. Barry Alvarez taking over the Badgers.
I thought about bringing that up.
They were terrible before he got there, right? Was Wisconsin terrible?
My dad graduated from Madison in 81.
Yeah.
And he told me they'd celebrate first downs like they won a national championship. So,
yeah.
Now they've done everything in the past 5-10 years, but he built, to ruin his legacy, but he built like a 20-year stable. Now it wasn't a national championship.
No, but he did. Yeah, that's, I guess, that would be the distinction. I mean, he didn't win the whole thing, and that's what still stuns me that Cignetti has. Let's get back on schedule. Pause. We'll probably stay with this for one more segment. Glenn Mason in studio beginning at 4, and we'll talk hockey. Russo Radio is scheduled for 5 o'clock.
Spend an evening with Jeff Foxworthy, known for his signature "You Might Be a Redneck" jokes. Don't miss out on the Grammy-nominated Legend when he takes the stage at Treasure Island Event Center March 14th. Secure your tickets today, TICasino.com.
Dean Blevins has food in his mouth, but he would say Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich is one of the greatest coaches of all time. But I think when it comes to greatest coaching period for a given team or teams, I just don't know. I think there's too much talent there for me to put him in that list. I'm never going to penalize a coach who has sustained success for having talent, because that's what the best coaches do. They get the best out of what that talent offers. Popovich won the finals in his second year in San Antonio Davy. But remember, he got to tank for Tim Duncan and then pair Duncan with David Robinson in his first year as Spurs coach. So, again, all-time great. There's not any question about that. But that's an awful lot of talent that is kind of fallen into your lap. It's pretty hard to screw up Tim Duncan. I think everybody knew that pretty much at the time, though. Clayton from Rochester suggested Dean Blevins, with food in his mouth, would say, pop. Purple Kool-Aid is tasteless guy. Rick Adelman winning 26 games with the Wolves in 2011. Well, relatively speaking, that might well have been the case. How many in our audience, Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line, have seen Breaking Away? I haven't seen it in probably 20 years. I have no idea if it holds up, but I know it's a hell of a film that, whether you went to Indiana or not, did very well and was a great story. And as I said, in real life, the folks who lived in town, grew up in Bloomington, it had nothing much to do with IU. They were not called cutters. They were called stonies. I think they didn't want to use that term because they were afraid that somebody would make associated with pot, because it had nothing to do with pot. So it had to do with the quarries, in the limestone quarries in southern Indiana. So they went with cutters instead of stonies as a result. But it's a fine motion picture. NC State men's basketball team in '83, the Jimmy Valvano run. Perhaps I'd have to look at what they had done previously. I mean, that's one of the big advantages that SIG has. What he inherited. Let me double check here the Indiana year-by-year record. Indiana football year-by-year. I'm pretty sure they were 3-9 3 straight years under Tom Allen before SIG came aboard and made his famous, he showed up at a basketball game and did the old Purdue sucks. And I remember it well, but I remember rolling my eyes because that's always the easy part, That's always the easy, how many times have we seen coach, they come on strong and we're going to be different. I'm going to be tough guy and I'm going to declare and I'm going to do all of these things. And, what does it usually lead to? Well, actually, it was worse than I thought. The 3 previous seasons before Signetti arrived and went 11-2, the Hoosiers finished 2-10, 4-8, and 3-9. And in the Big Ten, they were a combined 3-24. 3-24. Since then, in 2 years in the Big Ten, Signetti has gone 17-1. You can't top that. This can't be topped. It's ridiculous. I don't care what advantages he had or the system being changed or whatever the case may be. I'd say you're trying too hard to somehow turn it into a negative. Any other movie suggestions for great coaches? We've had some good ones so far. Let's see. Shaka Smart's been named, maybe.
Coach Carter, perhaps.
Dan, I was born in 1997. Can you describe what it feels like for a beloved team to win a championship of any kind?
Jeez.
Sounds like a great time. Yeah, it is. It's now it's a little different in that I'm further removed from it. I'm in Minnesota. So I'm not in the belly of the beast. I'm not in the middle of where it would, I'm not where Bozich is. Bozich is in Louisville, but he's close enough to Indiana there where I think he feels it more closely and has always lived there where, I left. I'm coming up on 40 years that I've been here. So you have to factor that up. Was there any outrage about the fact that the College National Championship wasn't available on an over-the-air channel? Well, hasn't that been the case for a while now? Aren't we? I mean, I think the genie's out of that bottle. I get it. In a perfect world, we would still have 4 channels and everybody have access to it with an antenna, but I don't know. I think we're lucky it wasn't on like Prime. Well, yeah, you're something. Right. At least, yeah, exactly right. That might well be true. All right, let's make this the top of the hour break. Mace is in the house. And I'm sure he will react to the Indiana victory. And we'll try to get into some other things as well, both college football. I do want to talk officiating with him because it was a big topic on the pro side, especially. And I want to talk about some of the officiating yesterday, actually, regarding, as I said, I think an utter lack of understanding of what in college football constitutes roughing the passer. Because I think it's actually looser in college than it is in professional football, where it might be too tight. There's got to be a middle ground in there somewhere. So, Mace, if you have questions for him, Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 64686. Hockey conversation with Russo. That's coming up at 5.